in the quiet folds of Italy's mist-laden hills. Long before the might of Rome or the philosophies of Greece shaped the world, there existed a people whose story has almost dissolved into the earth itself, the Etruscans. Their tombs lie hidden beneath vineyards and stone villages, their language half understood, their gods forgotten by name but not by presence. Tonight, as the world outside your window grows still, we journey into that twilight world between myth and memory to uncover the entire story of the Etruscans, the civilization that Rome tried to erase but never could. Sit back, relax, and let the sound of time itself unfold. Imagine the air thick with the scent of cedar smoke and bronze, the glow of torchlight flickering across walls painted with feasts, chariots, and the afterlife. These were the Etruscans, masters of mystery, who built their cities on the ridges of central Italy between rivers and seas, guarding their rituals from the eyes of strangers. Their world was older than Rome, yet somehow more refined, more spiritual, and perhaps more haunted. No one knows for certain where they came from. Some say they rose from the very soil of Tuscany, born of its volcanic breath. Others believe they were seafarers from distant Anatolia, survivors of a vanished realm who brought with them strange symbols, foreign gods, and a language no one could read. The Etruscans themselves left no grand myth of origin, only clues carved into stone, half whispered, half fierce. Even now, scholars lean over shards of pottery and bronze mirrors, trying to decode the voices that echo from their graves. What makes the Etruscans so different is not just what they built, but what they believed. They saw the world as a conversation between the living and the dead, between sky and soil. Every lightning strike, every shadow across a field, carried a message from the divine. And so, their priests, the haruspices, read omens in the entrails of sacrificed animals, in the flight of birds, in the patterns of the stars. For them, the universe was alive, breathing and watching. And though time has buried their cities and silenced their songs, something of their gaze still lingers in the Italian landscape, a sense that every stone might remember. From this ancient mystery we begin, where civilization hums beneath the ground, waiting to be heard once more. To understand the Etruscans, we must first step into their cities, silent now, but once alive with sound and color. Picture towering walls of cut stone, streets paved with volcanic rock that still carry the faint grooves of chariot wheels, and homes with tiled roofs and open courtyards filled with the smoke of burning incense. The Etruscans were builders of harmony, blending the practical and the divine in every structure they raised. Their cities like Tarquinia, Vigy, and Cerveteri were not mere settlements. They were reflections of the cosmos, each aligned with sacred directions, each built to honor invisible gods who ruled over the wind, the water, and the underworld. When night fell, the glow from their temples reached the stars, as if the city itself was offering light back to the heavens. Unlike later Romans who would conquer through power, the Etruscans conquered through culture, art, trade, and reverence. They imported Greek pottery, Egyptian gold, and exotic spices from the East, yet transformed them into something distinctly their own. The walls of their tombs were painted not with scenes of war or conquest, but of feasts, dancing, and music, life eternal, captured in motion. Some say these paintings were meant to comfort the dead, to remind them that death was only a continuation of joy in another form. Others suggest something deeper, that the Etruscans didn't fear death at all, because they believed it was merely a return to divine essence. Their gods watched over every act of life from birth to burial land, so the boundary between the living and the dead was not a wall, but a curtain easily parted. Imagine walking through an Etruscan necropolis at dusk, the wind sighing through the cypress trees, the stone doorways carved like houses for those who had moved on, each tomb a home for eternity, each name carved into eternity's breath. And somewhere, faintly, the echo of laughter from a vanished banquet. This is how the Etruscans lived as mortals fearing the end, but as guests at the table of eternity. Their civilization whispered that life was sacred, fleeting, and eternal all at once. And as we explore deeper into their world, we begin to see a reflection of something uncomfortably familiar, the reminder that what we build, what we love, and what we leave behind may outlast us, but only if the earth allows it. The Etruscan language remains one of history's most haunting enigmas, a tongue that once echoed across hills and markets, now reduced to fragments carved into stone and bronze. Scholars have spent centuries trying to unlock its code, but it resists translation like a ghost refusing to be named. Over 10,000 inscriptions have been found in mirrors, urns, amulets, and tomb walls, each offering a glimpse into a vanished voice. We can read the letters, yes, because they borrowed the alphabet from the Greeks, but the meanings remain elusive. The words describe offerings, family names, prayers to unseen gods, but the grammar, the spirit of the speech, slips away from comprehension. Some researchers believe the Etruscan language had no relatives in Europe, that it was a linguistic island adrift between known tongues. Others suggest it may trace its roots to the mysterious lands of Anatolia or the Aegean, linking it to the lost Lemnian language. Yet none of these theories fully hold. The Etruscans spoke in a rhythm that seems to hover between the known and the unknowable, like a melody half heard through time. Imagine an Etruscan priest reciting an incantation. Beneath a storm-lit sky, his voice rising and falling in patterns meant to summon favor or avert disaster. The words would sound foreign even to their Roman descendants, who later absorbed their rituals but forgot the meanings. This is the tragedy of language. It carries the soul of a people, and when it dies, their thoughts, their humor, their fears die with it. What remains of the Etruscan voice is therefore not just an academic puzzle. It's a whisper from another way of thinking, another way of being human. Each inscription is like an eye peering back through centuries of silence, trying to tell us something we can almost but not quite understand. The few phrases that have been deciphered speak of offerings, love, mourning, and divinity. Simple human things, eternal in any age. Yet the deeper meanings, those sacred sounds that once bound their rituals together, are gone. And perhaps that's the way the Etruscans intended it. They believed that sacred knowledge was not for everyone, that truth was not to be shouted but hidden beneath layers of mystery. Their silence, then, is not failure, is protection. Their words are still alive, just not for us to hear. The Etruscans saw divinity not in distant heavens, but in the trembling soil beneath their feet, in thunder that split the sky, and in the silent gaze of the dead. Their gods were ancient, powerful, and uncomfortably close forces that listened, demanded, and intervened. They did not separate religion from daily life. To live was to be surrounded by omens. Every breath, every harvest, every battle depended on the will of the divine. Their pantheon was vast, filled with deities that would later be adopted, renamed, and softened by the Romans. But in their original form, they were fierce and untamed. Tinia, the god of thunder, ruled the heavens with bolts of judgment, while Uni, the queen of the gods, held dominion over fertility and fate. Minerva, goddess of wisdom and war, was not gentle like the Greek Athena, but unpredictable, patron of both creation and destruction. Yet for the Etruscans, the true heart of the divine world lay underground. They believed the earth itself was alive, its depths home to powerful spirits known as the Tiki, involuted the veiled gods, beings so ancient and mysterious that even the other gods feared them. Their will was unknowable, their presence felt in earthquakes, storms, and strange coincidences that defied explanation. To understand these forces, the Etruscans developed a sacred science, the discipline of divination. Their priests, the haruspices, studied the livers of sacrificed animals to read the messages of the gods, tracing patterns of veins and colors as if interpreting a divine manuscript. Others observed lightning, counting the seconds between flash and thunder, recording the direction it struck, each variation a different command from the heavens. This system of signs, called the Disciplina Etrusca, guided rulers, generals, and common people alike. It was both science and faith, reason and fear woven together. Even Rome, in all its arrogance, adopted it. Centuries later, Roman emperors still relied on Etruscan augurs to interpret celestial will before waging war or building temples. That endurance speaks to something deeper. The Etruscans understood the rhythm of the world in a way few others did. They did not seek to control nature. They listened to it. They built no separation between the sacred and the mundane, because they believed the gods were always watching, always near, speaking in thunder, in flight, in fire, and perhaps they still are. Beneath the rolling hills of central Italy, vast necropolises stretched like underground cities of silence, built not for the living but for eternity. These are the tombs of the Etruscan stone chambers carved deep into the earth, where families rested together in elaborate replicas of their homes. When you walk through the passageways of Tarquinia or Cerveteri, you are not merely in a cemetery. You are walking through their vision of the afterlife, a place meant to be as vibrant and comforting as life itself. Inside, the walls are alive with color murals of dancers, banquets, and musicians painted 3,000 years ago, yet still pulsing with motion. The Etruscans did not paint to mourn, they painted to continue. Each tomb was designed as a home for the soul, complete with beds, furniture carved from rock, and personal belongings of the deceased. The belief was simple and beautiful. Death was a journey, not an ending. The body might decay, but the spirit would feast forever under the care of the gods. The scenes on the walls show this transition in tender detail. Men and women reclining on couches, cups raised in eternal toasts, servants preparing food, musicians playing lyres. Even the animals were included, as though no joy of life should be left behind. Yet beneath this beauty lies something eerie, a quiet obsession with time and continuity. The Etruscans believed that by recreating life so faithfully in death, they could preserve the spirit's identity, keeping it safe from dissolution. To disturb a tomb was to shatter a soul's peace, a crime against both the dead and the gods. And yet, over centuries, many of these resting places were broken open by Romans and later by modern explorers. The treasures inside scattered, the bones displaced. But even stripped bare, the tombs seem to hum with presence. The air is thick, the silence heavy, as if the spirits have not quite left. Archaeologists often describe an uncanny feeling when they enter an untouched Etruscan chamber, the sense that someone is still watching from the painted walls. Perhaps it is because, for the Etruscans, death was not the opposite of life, but its mirror, and those who crossed over were never truly gone. Their world endures in color, in stone, and in memory, the tombs that remember what time tries to forget. Long before Rome rose to dominance, there stood another city, the jewel of the Etruscan League, a powerful and proud city-state that once rivaled Rome itself. Located just 12 miles north of the Tiber River, Villiers was older, wealthier, and grander than its ambitious neighbor. It was a city of stone walls, sacred temples, and skilled artisans whose bronze and terracotta works dazzled all who saw them. For centuries, Rome looked upon Vigi with envy and fear. The two cities were bound by proximity and doomed by rivalry. Viga controlled key trade routes, fertile lands, and a spiritual prestige that Rome had yet to achieve. The Etruscans of Viga lived in splendor, surrounded by vineyards and shrines, their temples dedicated to gods older than Jupiter himself. The most famous was the Temple of Portinatio, dedicated to Apollo, where life-size terracotta statues once stood upon the roof gods rendered in motion, their painted eyes seeming to follow you as you walked below. But power breeds conflict, and Rome's hunger could not be contained. For nearly a century, the two cities clashed in a series of brutal wars that tested not only their armies but their beliefs. The final siege of Vigi lasted 10 long years, a mirror of Troy's legendary fall. In the cold of winter, around 396 BCE, Rome's dictator Marcus Furius Camillus devised a plan that would seal Villiers' fate. His soldiers tunneled beneath the city walls, emerging in the heart of the temple to Juno, the city's divine protector. As the Etruscans performed their sacred rites above, Roman soldiers erupted from the earth like avenging spirits, taking Via from within. What followed was slaughter. The city burned, its people enslaved, its treasures carried back to Rome. The goddess Juno herself was said to have been invited to leave Vigi and dwell in Rome's newly built temple, a symbolic theft of divinity. With the fall of Veii, Rome absorbed not only land and wealth, but Etruscan culture itself. The conqueror became the inheritor, taking their architecture, their rituals, their gods. Yet beneath Rome's triumph lay a quiet truth had killed its mirror. The ghost of Vigi never vanished. It lingers in the soil, beneath the vineyards, beneath the city that once taught Rome what greatness could look like. Among the many legacies the Etruscans left behind, none are as hauntingly alive as their art. Their bronze work, glimmering, expressive, and eerily human, captures the soul of a civilization that understood both beauty and mortality. The Etruscans were master metalworkers, their forges glowing like miniature suns across the hills of central Italy. From raw copper and tin, they created bronze statues, mirrors, jewelry, and sacred votive offerings that seemed to breathe. Their skill was unmatched in the ancient world, admired by the Greeks and later imitated by the Romans. But unlike the Greeks, who sculpted idealized perfection, the Etruscans made faces that felt real. Their figures had wrinkles, crooked smiles, and eyes full of thought expressions that seemed to hide private stories. When you look at an Etruscan bronze today, you do not see a god. You see a person who might have lived, who might still be thinking. One of their most famous creations, the Chimera of Arezzo, captures this strange vitality, a monstrous creature with the body of a lion, a serpent for a tail, and a goat's head emerging from its back. Cast in bronze in the 5th century BCE, it stands frozen in motion, its muscles taut, its mouth open in a silent roar. Scholars believe it once stood in a temple as an offering to Tenia, the thunder god, a symbol of both chaos and divine control. Yet there is something more, something almost sorrowful in its eyes. as if even mythic beasts in Etruscan art carried the weight of mortality. The same haunting realism appears in their funerary sculptures, especially the famous terracotta sarcophagi depicting reclining couples. The figures rest together as if attending an eternal banquet, their faces serene yet vividly human. The woman's hand often rests gently on her partner's shoulder, her lips curled in a soft, knowing smile. It is art not of domination or worship, but of intimacy, belief that love, companionship, and laughter could transcend death. The Etruscans sculpted not for glory but for memory, their creations bridging the living and the dead. When the Romans later filled their temples with cold marble, something was lost: the warmth, the humanity, the quiet sadness that had once filled Etruscan art. These bronzes, now scattered in museums and tombs, remain as faces in the dark, witnesses to a civilization that spoke through metal and left behind a beauty too alive to die. Beneath the rolling hills of Tuscany and Lazio, the Etruscan cities still breathe, hidden beneath layers of time and earth. Their towns were not mere clusters of buildings, but living entities, carefully planned and infused with spiritual meaning. Each Etruscan city mirrored the heavens, laid out according to divine geometry, the Cardo and Decumanus, streets aligned with the stars. Temples placed at cosmic intersections where the human and divine could meet. They believed their cities were reflections of the gods' own realms, and thus every street, every wall, every threshold was sacred. But unlike the enduring marble of Rome, Etruscan architecture was ephemeral, built from wood and clay that returned to the earth. What survived were the stones beneath the tombs, the walls, and the faint outlines of roads once filled with merchants, priests, and children chasing each other under the Tuscan sun. The city of Tarquinia rose as one of their grandest capitals, a place of color and spirit where the dead were painted as vividly as the living. In its necropolis, vast chambers were carved beneath the soil, adorned with frescoes of banquets, music, and dance as a celebration of life even in death. Volterra and Viatu stood as guardians of Etruscan culture, their walls whispering of forgotten kings and the clang of ritual bronze. Each city was both fortress and temple, both market and sanctuary. The Etruscans built their homes around courtyards, where families gathered under open skies to offer wine to household gods. Rainwater ran through carefully designed drains, and early urban plumbing systems showed a level of sophistication the Romans would later claim as their own. Yet, as centuries passed, these once vibrant cities sank into silence. The Romans absorbed them one by one. Veii fell in 396 BCE after a brutal 10-year siege, its treasures looted, its people enslaved. But even in defeat, the Etruscan spirit did not vanish. Their urban blueprints became the skeletons of Roman towns. Their sacred layouts survived in the grid of every colony the empire built. Beneath modern Italian streets, Etruscan tunnels still stretch like veins, channels of memory carrying the pulse of an ancient world. In the end, their cities were never truly lost. They merely sank below the surface, waiting for light, waiting for a voice to call them back from the soil. Among the greatest enigmas of the Etruscan world is their language, a tongue unlike any other in the ancient Mediterranean. It was neither Greek nor Latin, neither Semitic nor Indo-European, and even today it remains only partially understood. What survives are fragments, funerary inscriptions, votive offerings, carved mirrors, and tablets of bronze that whisper in a voice both haunting and incomplete. To read Etruscan is to gaze into fog. We can recognize shapes, but their meanings slip away just as we reach for them. The alphabet, adapted from the Greeks, is legible, but the words themselves belong to no known linguistic family. Scholars can translate only the simplest of phrases. He lived, she gave, son of. But the deeper poetry, the prayers, the myths written in their native script remain hidden behind silence. The discovery of the Piaggi tablets, 3 golden sheets found on the coast of modern-day Italy, offered a rare key. 2 were written in Etruscan and 1 in Phoenician, hinting at diplomatic ties with the great seafaring powers of the Mediterranean. They speak of a goddess Une, the Etruscan queen of heaven honored, in a temple by a ruler seeking divine favor. Yet even here, much of the meaning is lost in the ambiguity of translation. Was this an offering of peace, a pact between nations, or a plea to the gods for power over the waves? Some historians believe the Etruscan language was a relic of a much older Europe, a survivor of a prehistoric tongue that predated Indo-European migrations. Others think it was imported from the Aegean or Anatolia, perhaps linked to the mysterious Lemnian inscriptions found on a Greek island, suggesting a shared origin across the sea. Whatever its source, the Etruscan voice fades as Latin rises, consumed by the empire that borrowed its gods, its symbols, and its spirit. By the time Rome ruled the peninsula, Etruscan was already a dying sound, preserved only in tombs and sacred texts that few could still read. Today, linguists continue to piece together this broken language like archaeologists of sound, knowing that with each word deciphered, a window opens to a lost mind. The silence of the Etruscans is not emptiness, it's a hum beneath history, waiting to be heard. And as we lean closer, we begin to sense what they might have whispered about God's fate, and the thin line between life and shadow. To understand the Etruscans, one must walk among their tombs, for it is there that they revealed the truth of how they lived. Unlike other ancient peoples who built houses for gods and graves for the dead, the Etruscans built tombs that looked like homes complete with beds, chairs, tools, and painted walls. Death, for them, was not an end but a continuation, a quiet step into another form of existence. Their necropolises were cities of silence, mirroring the world above with streets, gates, and family dwellings carved from the earth. Inside the tomb of the leopards in Tarquinia, vivid frescoes still dance with color after 25 centuries. There are banquets under open skies, servants pouring wine, musicians playing lyres, and couples reclining on couches, their faces serene. This was not sorrow, but celebration of belief that the spirit would feast eternally in the afterlife. In Cerveteri, the Banditarcha necropolis stretches like a labyrinth of stone domes and corridors, each chamber telling its own family story. The Etruscans buried their dead with mirrors, jewelry, armor, and even chariots, believing they would need them beyond the grave. To them, the underworld was not a place of punishment, but transition, a realm guided by mysterious beings like Vanth, the winged spirit of death, and Charon, the blue-skinned gatekeeper who carried a hammer instead of a scythe. These figures were neither evil nor kind. They were functionaries of fate, reminders that all must cross the threshold. Some tombs depict this crossing in detail: heroes greeted by ancestors, souls led by spirits through misty gates, banquets awaiting them beyond. The artistry of these murals is both human and divine, filled with movement, laughter, and a profound acceptance of mortality. The Romans, inheriting Etruscan customs, would later adopt this same belief that the dead were to be honored, not feared, that their presence lingered among the living. Even their word for person, derived from the Etruscan fursu, originally meant a mask used in funerary rites. Every Roman tragedy, every masked actor on a stage, carried with it a shadow of Etruscan ritual. Their tombs were not monuments to despair, but reflections of life's fragile beauty, reminder that in the end, we all return to the earth, but perhaps not to nothing. Perhaps, like the Etruscans believed, we simply go home. The Etruscan gods were not distant rulers of heaven, but intimate presences woven into every act of life. They saw the divine not as a single power, but as a web of forces that governed the world through signs, omens, and whispers carried by wind and thunder. To live in Etruria was to live in constant dialogue with unseen entities, gods of earth, sky, and underworld, each demanding reverence and respect. The most powerful among them was Tinia, lord of the heavens, whose thunderbolts were feared even by other deities. Alongside him stood Uni, his consort, radiant and watchful, and Menreva, the goddess of wisdom and war. Yet unlike the later Roman pantheon that would borrow their names, the Etruscan gods were unpredictable, almost wild. They could bless or destroy without warning, for their will was absolute and unknowable. The Etruscans did not pray for favor as much as they sought understanding, trying to read divine intent in the flight of birds, in the crack of lightning, or in the entrails of a sacrificed animal. Haruspicy, the sacred art of divination, was their bridge to the gods. Priests known as haruspices would examine the livers of sheep and cattle, interpreting their shape, color, and markings as messages from beyond. The bronze model, known as the liver of Piacenza, covered in Etruscan inscriptions, reveals a map of the cosmos divided into sections, ruled by different deities, a guide for those who dared to listen to divine language. The heavens, too, were a vast text to be read. Augurs stood on hillsides at dawn, staffs raised to the sky, dividing the firmament into sacred regions. Every bird that flew, every flash of lightning, every distant rumble of storm was a word from the gods written in air. And so the Etruscans lived with a sense of cosmic participation, as if every human act resonated through the divine world. Even Rome would later absorb this idea, making divination a cornerstone of statecraft and religion. Yet in Etruria, it was deeply personal, a covenant of awe and fear, of respect and surrender. Their gods were not comforting. They were reminders that humanity existed within a living, breathing universe full of unseen eyes. To the Etruscans, every decision, every silence, every death was already known by the shadows that watched. When we step into the world of Etruscan art, we enter a realm where color, motion, and spirit blend in perfect harmony. Unlike the rigid idealism of Greek sculpture or the later grandeur of Roman stone, Etruscan art feels alive, breathing, laughing, almost human in its imperfection. They were masters of terracotta, shaping gods and mortals alike with hands that understood the warmth of clay. Their sarcophagi, those of married couples reclining side by side, seemed to pulse with life even now, their faces animated, their gestures mid-speech, their eyes filled with an intimacy that defied the coldness of death. This focus on the human bond, the closeness between man and woman, parent and child, god and mortal, defined Etruscan aesthetics. In the sarcophagus of the spouses, found at Cerveteri, the couple reclines as if caught in eternal conversation, smiling gently as if aware of their place between worlds. Their bodies are stylized, their hair elaborate, but their presence is disarmingly real, a love story carved into eternity. Etruscan painters filled tomb walls with feasts, dancers, and athletes, celebrating the vibrancy of existence rather than its end. The colors deep reds, soft blues, warm ochres were not just decorative but symbolic, evoking life, blood, and divinity. In their bronze work, they captured energy in motion, warriors striding, chariots racing, gods emerging from flame. Each artifact seemed to carry a spark of the soul that created it. Even their mirrors and jewelry were engraved with mythological scenes, hinting that beauty itself was sacred. The Etruscans also crafted the first true portrait art in the West, daring to capture the individuality of faces rather than idealized forms. To look into the bronze face of an Etruscan noble is to meet someone who lived, loved, and dreamed 2.5 millennia ago. Their art was never distant. It was a conversation across time. When Rome rose, it borrowed heavily from these designs, the bronze casting, the temple styles, even the realistic portraiture that would define imperial sculpture. Yet something ineffable was lost. The Romans sought power in their art. The Etruscans sought life. Their creations remind us that to be remembered is not merely to be carved in stone, but to leave behind a feeling, a trace of laughter, a moment of breath. In that sense, their art never died, it simply changed its name. The Etruscans understood the feast as something more than a meal lit, was a sacred act, a ritual binding the living and the dead in one endless circle of remembrance. Their banquets were not held in mourning, but in joy, a celebration of continuity. Archaeologists have uncovered hundreds of frescoes showing tables laden with roasted meats, pitchers of wine, dancers twirling to the music of double flutes, and reclining couples smiling as if caught mid-laughter. To the Etruscans, dining was divine communion. The act of sharing food mirrored the cosmic order. It was believed that the gods themselves once feasted among mortals, and that by eating, drinking, and rejoicing, humans honored their place in that sacred harmony. In the tomb of the triclinium at Tarquinia, walls shimmer with the painted echoes of such gatherings, men and women reclining together, adorned in fine robes, attendants moving gracefully between them, holding platters and cups. This equality of the sexes startled later Romans and Greeks, who viewed Etruscan women as scandalously free. Yet here, equality was not rebellion, it was faith. Each guest represented balance, a union of masculine and feminine, earth and sky. The aroma of roasted meats, the flicker of torches, the rhythm of flutes, they were offerings to eternity. Even the arrangement of the banquet followed divine geometry. 3 couches, 3 corners, 3 directions, the triclinium symbolizing the triad of life, death, and rebirth. Beneath the feasts, deeper meanings stirred. The food was not just nourishment, but passage, a symbolic consumption of the world before stepping into another. Wine, rich and dark, represented memory itself, drunk so that the soul would not forget the taste of existence. In some tombs, clay vessels were found still containing residue of oils and honeyed wine, left for spirits to sip in the afterlife. These banquets reveal how the Etruscans saw death not as an abrupt end, but as the next chapter in a grand celebration. To die was to take one's seat at the eternal table, to be surrounded by family, ancestors, and gods in a feast without end. And perhaps that is why their art still glows with warmth. It was painted by hands that did not fear the dark, by people who believed that love, laughter, and music could echo beyond the grave forever. Among the Etruscans, women occupied a place so elevated, so respected, that later Greek and Roman writers regarded it with suspicion and outrage. To them, it seemed scandalous that women dined beside men, owned property, and bore names recorded in inscriptions alongside their husbands. But to the Etruscans, this equality was simply the natural order of things. Their world was not built upon domination but partnership, and the feminine was sacred, woven into every aspect of life and faith. Etruscan women were priestesses, landowners, artists, and oracles, custodians of both family lineage and divine will. In painted tombs, they appear not as passive figures but as central presences, raising cups, playing music, or guiding the dead toward eternity. The goddess Uni, radiant and formidable, embodied this spirit protector of marriage, fertility, and sovereignty. She was not a submissive consort to Tinia, but his equal, capable of granting kingship and commanding fate. Many Etruscan artifacts bear her symbol, the mirror, representing truth and reflection. Women carried these mirrors inscribed with prayers, or myths, perhaps as tools of divination or tokens of power. Even the word fursu, which evolved into the Latin persona, likely came from an Etruscan funerary ritual led by masked women who bridged life and death. Unlike the rigid hierarchies of their neighbors, Etruscan society recognized female autonomy in law and lineage. Children bore both parents' names, a testament to the mother's equal status in ancestry and inheritance. Their voices echoed through politics and religions. Some even ruled as queens or acted as advisors to kings. The Romans, inheriting the Etruscan monarchy before becoming a republic, absorbed fragments of this tradition, though never its full spirit. They remembered Tanakiel, the Etruscan queen who interpreted omens and shaped the destiny of Rome's early kings. Her wisdom recorded, but her language lost. In her image stands the archetype of the Etruscan woman, elegant, educated, powerful yet serene. The freedom of Etruscan women baffled outsiders who measured civilization by male dominance. Yet perhaps it was this balance, this reverence for both masculine and feminine forces, that made Etruria so uniquely harmonious. Their society moved in rhythm with the dual pulse of life strength and nurture, wisdom and beauty. In the end, the Etruscans remind us that civilization's greatness is not only in what it builds, but in how it honors the hand that builds beside it. The Etruscans were not only artists and seers, but rulers, architects of power, whose influence stretched across the Italian peninsula long before Rome rose to fame. Their cities were independent, each governed by its own king or council, yet bound together by shared ritual and faith. The kings of Etruria were not mere politicians. They were sacred intermediaries, chosen to interpret the will of the gods and ensure harmony between heaven and earth. Power, in their hands, was both divine duty and mortal burden. Among these rulers, none looms larger in memory than the Tarquin dynasty, whose blood would eventually flow into the veins of Rome itself. The early Roman kings Tarquinius Priscus, Servius, Tullius, and Tarquinius Superbus were of Etruscan descent, and through them Etruscan culture entered the very bones of Rome. They brought with them the symbols of authority: the purple robe, the golden crown, the ivory scepter, all later worn by Roman emperors. They introduced the fasces, bundles of rods tied around an axe, symbolizing unity and power, a mark of law still echoed in modern iconography today. But with divine power came inevitable corruption. Tarquinius Superbus, the last king of Rome, ruled with arrogance and cruelty. His downfall sparked by the violation of Lucretia, an event that ignited revolution. Rome cast off its kings, vowing never again to be ruled by one man. Yet the irony remained: the very republic they built was shaped in the image of its Etruscan monarchs. Their rituals, their temples, their omens, even the grandeur of the Senate itself were born from Etruscan order. The Etruscans believed that kings ruled not forever, but for a fixed period decreed by fate. Their religious texts, the Fatale, spoke of cosmic cycles in which even civilizations had lifespans destined to rise, flourish, and fade. Perhaps their kings knew this truth too well. They ruled with splendor, yet carried the weight of inevitability. The Etruscans' understanding of kingship was tragic glory and doom entwined. To be king was to stand closest to the gods, but also nearest to death. As the centuries turned, the blood of those ancient rulers thinned into legend, absorbed by the republic that betrayed them. Yet their shadow endured. Every Roman triumph, every imperial coronation, every echo of command carried with it the pulse of Etruscan kingship, the sacred fire of power that could never truly be extinguished. Among the most mysterious legacies of the Etruscans was their obsession with reading the will of the gods, a practice that intertwined religion, politics, and daily life. Their priests, the haruspices, were not simply ritualists, they were scholars of the heavens and interpreters of the unseen, trained for decades in complex systems that linked the mortal world to divine intention. Their tools were precise and ritualized. Bronze models of animal livers, marked with intricate divisions corresponding to celestial regions. Flight patterns of birds observed from temple rooftops. Lightning interpreted as messages in the sky. Every event, war, harvest, construction, was filtered through these omens. Each decision contingent on celestial approval. Some scholars suggest that the Etruscans' expertise in divination gave them an advantage over neighbors, allowing them to anticipate conflict, plan political moves, and negotiate treaties with uncanny foresight. Others propose that this elaborate system was as much about control as prophecy, a method to maintain authority by positioning the priests as indispensable arbiters between gods and men. The rituals themselves were immersive, sensory experiences designed to impress, intimidate, and focus attention. The clang of bronze instruments, the smell of burning incense, the meticulous arrangement of sacrificial victims all combined to create a theater of power that shaped social hierarchies and political decisions. This deep spiritual knowledge did not vanish with Etruria's decline. The Roman Republic inherited, adapted, and codified Etruscan divination into state practice. Augurs and haruspices became integral to military campaigns and political ceremonies, their methods formalized but retaining echoes of their mysterious origin. The art of reading the future, once confined to hilltop temples and shadowed groves, became a public affair, enshrined in law and ritual. Even the triumph of a Roman general, the red-painted face, the slave whispering reminders of mortality. The procession of spoils was a direct continuation of Etruscan ceremonial sophistication. Some researchers argue that through these practices, the Etruscans achieved a form of immortality, their spiritual logic embedded into the foundations of Roman governance and public life. Others suggest that what survived was only a pale shadow, ritualized and stripped of context, leaving modern observers to speculate about its true meaning. Yet in every thunderclap, every flight of a bird, every flicker of flame, one can still sense the lingering presence of Etruscan diviners, observing, interpreting, and influencing the course of human events long after their cities had fallen silent. And as we ponder their intricate relationship with fate, one question remains: did they truly see the future, or did they simply understand the patterns hidden in the chaos of the world? The The cities of the Etruscans rose from volcanic hills with a quiet grandeur that whispered of both practicality and ritual significance, a balance that defined their approach to urban life. Streets were not haphazard. They followed careful alignments that reflected a cosmic order, as if the city itself were a miniature universe mapped onto the earth. Temples crowned hills, their three-room layouts echoing divine triads, providing spaces for both public worship and administrative control. While terracotta decorations glimmered in sunlight, each detail infused with meaning. Researchers suggest that their construction techniques, arches, drainage systems, and carefully surveyed foundations enabled them to create structures that would endure centuries, influencing Roman engineering for generations. The Cloaca Maxima, Rome's great sewer, was built upon centuries of Etruscan hydraulic expertise, a silent testament to the meticulous knowledge of water management and city planning that had flourished long before the Republic. Some argue that the architectural proportions and decorative programs of Etruscan temples reflected more than aesthetic preference. They encoded a worldview, a method of embedding spiritual and social hierarchies into physical space. Terracotta, plaques, roof ornaments, and sculpted friezes depicted scenes of myth, ritual, and power, communicating values to both residents and visitors. Urban boundaries, or pomeria, defined sacred spaces while regulating legal and ceremonial life, a subtle intertwining of governance and spirituality. Streets led to plazas that hosted markets, civic gatherings, and religious festivals, blending commerce with ceremony in ways that reinforced both social cohesion and political authority. Archaeological evidence shows that residential quarters were organized around central courtyards, providing light, ventilation, and a private space for family rituals, suggesting that domestic life was deeply entwined with broader social and spiritual norms. Scholars propose that Etruscan architects understood materials and forces with precision. The weight distribution of arches, the flow of water through channels, the resistance of brick and stone to erosional knowledge born of observation and experimentation over generations. Decorative motifs were not merely ornamental. They carried symbolic meaning, representing divine protection, lineage, or civic pride. The cumulative effect of these architectural decisions created cities that were both functional and symbolic, spaces that guided daily life while reminding inhabitants of their place within a cosmic and civic order. As the Republic absorbed these cities, much of their structural genius persisted, hidden in plain sight, shaping Roman temples, forums, and urban infrastructure. Yet despite centuries of study, many aspects remain enigmatic. Why certain alignments were chosen, the full meaning of intricate terracotta scenes, the subtle rituals encoded in street layouts. One can walk among the ruins today and feel the lingering intelligence of planners who saw each stone, each arch, and each open space as part of a living, breathing cities that once commanded the hills and whose silent mastery still challenges our understanding. And as we trace these streets and temples, we are left to wonder, what secrets do these stones still guard, waiting for eyes patient enough to see? The artistic legacy of the Etruscans emerges like a whisper from tombs carved into volcanic hillsides, where painted walls, bronze figurines, and intricate jewelry offer glimpses into a civilization obsessed with both status and storytelling. Their art was not merely decorative. It functioned as a visual language, a medium through which social hierarchies, religious beliefs, and cultural identity were communicated across generations. Tomb paintings, for instance, often depict banquets, athletic contests, or ceremonial processions, scenes alive with motion and color, suggesting a society that celebrated both life and the rituals that honored the dead. Bronze workshops produced exquisite objects, from the ferocious chimera of Arezzo to delicate jewelry inlaid with gold and semi-precious stones, demonstrating a mastery of metallurgy that rivaled any Mediterranean culture of the time. Some researchers suggest that the frequent depiction of movement, feasting, and music in tombs reflects a worldview that saw life and death as a continuum, where social cohesion and spiritual preparation were intertwined. Others propose that these artistic motifs served political purposes, signaling the power and prestige of elite families even in death, a silent assertion of influence that would endure when ancestral authority on earth waned. Narrative composition in murals and reliefs shows sophisticated understanding of perspective, scale, and storytelling, techniques that would later inspire Roman portraiture and monumental art. Symbolism was layered. Animals, mythological figures, and ritual scenes encoded beliefs about divine favor, the cycles of nature, and moral lessons, yet the exact meanings remain tantalizingly elusive, obscured by the passage of centuries and the loss of contextual records. Jewelry, pottery, and everyday objects were similarly infused with symbolic weight, serving as markers of social identity, trade connections, and spiritual affiliation. The Etruscans understood that material culture could convey authority, belief, and memory across space and time. Even as Roman conquest absorbed these cities, much of the artistic vocabulary persisted, influencing decorative programs, portraiture, and ceremonial objects. Yet each artifact carries an aura of mystery, the intentions of the craftsman, the rituals that gave life to a painted scene, the conversations held around a banquet immortalized. In tomb art are shadows of a culture we can only partially reconstruct. As we examine these treasures, a haunting question lingers. What truths about identity, belief, and society remain hidden within the brushstrokes, the bronze folds, and the silent gaze of sculpted figures, waiting for the patient observer to uncover? The Etruscan language remains one of history's most tantalizing enigmas, a tongue spoken for centuries, yet now surviving only in fragments, inscriptions, and funerary texts that whisper hints of a once vibrant oral and written culture. Scholars have long struggled to decipher it, noting that its structure bears no close relation to the Indo-European languages surrounding it, creating a linguistic island in the heart of Italy. The inscriptions that survive are often short names, ceremonial formulas, but each letter carved into stone or painted on pottery feels like a voice from a distant past, offering a fleeting glimpse into thoughts, relationships, and rituals now mostly lost. Some researchers suggest the language may have carried complex legal and religious concepts that structured both governance and spiritual life, while others propose that the everyday speech and nuanced expressions of poetry, storytelling, and diplomacy remain irretrievably hidden. Evidence from bilingual inscriptions, where Latin translations accompany Etruscan texts, hints at the process of assimilation and adaptation as Roman influence expanded. Yet even these fragments reveal only glimpses of meaning, like shards of colored glass catching the light for a brief instant. The gradual decline of the language paralleled the integration of Etruscan cities into the Republic. Latin became the medium of administration, commerce, and law, while ancestral speech retreated into private, ceremonial, and familial contexts. By the 1st century BCE, Etruscan was rarely used in public inscriptions, surviving mainly in tombs and ritual contexts, where its sacred resonance persisted even as the population adopted Latin for practical life. The disappearance of a living linguistic culture had profound consequences for identity. The loss of vocabulary meant the loss of ways to articulate memory, law, philosophy, and social nuance unique to Etruscan thought. Scholars today rely on careful analysis of inscriptions, funerary formulas, and comparative study to reconstruct syntax, grammar, and meaning, but the picture remains incomplete, a puzzle missing crucial pieces. Each new discovery etched text on a bronze mirror, a funerary urn, a wall inscription sparks excitement and speculation, yet leaves us aware of the limits of our understanding. The Etruscans' voices echo faintly, a melodic undercurrent beneath the dominant Latin narrative, reminding us that language is not just communication but a vessel of culture, worldview, and memory. As we attempt to hear what was once spoken across volcanic hills and bustling marketplaces, one question lingers: what wisdom, poetry, or knowledge faded along with their words? And how much of a civilization can truly be understood when its voices have gone silent? The story of the Etruscans did not vanish entirely with the fall of their cities. Rather, it lingered quietly beneath the soil, waiting for centuries of curious eyes and careful hands to bring fragments back into the light. Renaissance scholars first glimpsed the remnants of this lost civilization, drawn to bronzes, pottery, and tombs, intrigued by the sophistication of a culture largely overshadowed by Greek and Roman narratives. Wealthy patrons sponsored excavations, often motivated more by the desire for artistic treasures than by historical understanding, resulting in spectacular discoveries like the bronze chimera of Arezzo, the Capitoline wolf, an intricate jewelry whose craftsmanship revealed a high level of technical expertise and aesthetic sensibility. Yet, much of the context for these artifacts was lost. Tombs were opened, frescoes removed, and urban layers disturbed, leaving tantalizing clues without full stories. Only in the 18th and 19th centuries did systematic archaeology begin to transform our understanding, emphasizing careful stratigraphy, documentation, and interpretation. Sites like Tarquinia, Cerveteri, and Volci revealed necropolises with tombs carved into volcanic tuff, decorated with vivid paintings capturing banquets, athletic contests, and ceremonial rites, preserving social customs and domestic life in ways literature could not. Excavations uncovered urban layouts, drainage systems, and workshop areas, giving insight into city planning, metallurgy, and artisanal production, highlighting the Etruscans' mastery of both engineering and art. The decipherment of inscriptions remained painstakingly slow, hindered by the isolation of the language and the limited corpus of texts. Scholars could identify names, places, and ritual formulas, but the broader intellectual, legal, and literary content remained largely elusive, adding an aura of mystery to every discovery. Modern archaeology has expanded the scope of understanding through advanced techniques, ground-penetrating radar mapping entire settlements, chemical analysis revealing trade networks and dietary habits, and DNA studies providing clues about origins, migration, and intermarriage, suggesting that Etruscan society was both locally rooted and cosmopolitan. Each discovery reshapes the story, offering glimpses of wealth, spirituality, and organization that hint at a civilization deeply intertwined with its environment, yet remarkably innovative and resilient. From tomb paintings to hydraulic systems, every artifact serves as a bridge to the past, reminding us that while the Etruscans' political power may have faded, their cultural legacy persisted in ways that continue to inform and inspire. And as researchers dig deeper, the question remains, how much of this civilization still lies hidden, waiting to rewrite our understanding of ancient Italy and its forgotten architects of culture? Even as their cities were absorbed into the expanding Roman Republic, the Etruscans left traces that would ripple through centuries, subtle yet persistent, shaping the culture and institutions that followed. Their influence is visible in the ceremonial life of Rome, from the complex rituals of augury, where trained specialists interpreted the flights of birds or the entrails of sacrificial victims, to the triumphs of generals whose robes, crowns, and scepters echoed symbols of Etruscan authority. Architectural forms and urban planning, refined over generations in Etruscan settlements, became foundational for Roman temples, drainage systems, and city layouts, blending practical engineering with spiritual symbolism. Even the distinctive three-room temple design, with proportional relationships reflecting divine triads, found expression across Roman religious architecture, linking function to cosmic order. Legal traditions inherited from Etruscan jurisprudence influenced the development of Roman law, embedding principles of written codes, property rights, and contractual procedures that endured for millennia. Art, too, carried echoes. The realistic portraiture, intricate bronze work, and tomb frescoes inspired subsequent Roman sculpture, decorative art, and narrative painting, preserving technical skills and aesthetic sensibilities that would later feed Renaissance revival. The linguistic shift to Latin gradually erased the Etruscan tongue from everyday use, yet ceremonial phrases, personal names, and inscriptions endured as faint whispers of a vanished language, hinting at concepts and practices otherwise lost to time. Even funerary customs, such as ritualized combats that evolved into gladiatorial games, transformed sacred observances into social spectacles, demonstrating how deeply Etruscan practices shaped public life in subtle yet enduring ways. Scholars argue that the assimilation of Etruscan elites into Roman society facilitated this cultural transmission, as families carried artistic, religious, and political knowledge into the heart of the Republic, preserving legacy within new structures of authority. The pattern is clear. The Etruscans' disappearance as a political force did not equate to cultural extinction. Rather, their innovations, beliefs, and artistry were absorbed, reinterpreted, and amplified, creating a complex tapestry that would influence the Mediterranean world for centuries. Even modern studies, from archaeological reconstructions to genetic analysis, reveal layers of continuity and adaptation, reminding us that human achievement rarely vanishes completely. It survives, hidden in plain sight, in customs, buildings, and ideas that persist long after their creators are gone. And so, the question lingers: how much of our understanding of Rome, of civilization itself, is built upon foundations first laid by these enigmatic people of the volcanic hills, whose story continues to challenge and inspire those who seek to uncover it? As we draw the final curtain on the story of the Etruscans, we are left not with answers, but with questions that refuse to fade, lingering like shadows over the hills and tombs they once called home. Their civilization, though absorbed into the machinery of the Roman Republic, resists full comprehension, tantalizing scholars with fragments of language, inscriptions, and artifacts whose meanings are only partially understood. The mystery begins with their origins. Still debated centuries later, some researchers suggest they were indigenous to the Italian peninsula, while others propose migration from the eastern Mediterranean. Yet no theory fully satisfies the evidence, leaving their beginnings suspended in uncertainty. Their language, a puzzle of isolated vocabulary and ceremonial formulae, offers tantalizing glimpses of thought, law, and ritual, yet remains largely unreadable, as if intentionally guarding its secrets. Archaeological remains, from tombs painted with vibrant feasts and processions to intricately crafted bronzes, provide glimpses of daily life, spirituality, and artistry. Yet these are fragments, snapshots frozen in time, leaving entire chapters of their society forever obscured. Even their absorption into Rome is shrouded in nuance. They were neither completely conquered nor fully autonomous. Their elites negotiating roles within a new political reality, their customs adapted rather than obliterated, their memory preserved in subtle, civic, religious, and artistic forms. The very tools that once governed their cities, the architecture, the urban planning, the drainage systems, the legal precedents lived on, reinterpreted and scaled, shaping societies far beyond their original borders. Yet in all of this continuity, the Etruscans remain an enigma, a civilization whose voice echoes faintly through the ages, whispering in the streets of Rome, the halls of museums, and the shadows of reconstructed tombs. Modern technology, satellite surveys, ground-penetrating radar, chemical and DNA analyzers offers tantalizing new insights, revealing trade networks, population movements, and dietary habits. Yet even these cannot reconstruct the full experience of a society whose soul seems to persist just beyond our grasp. Their story, rich in ingenuity, ritual, and artistry, challenges us to consider the delicate balance between preservation and loss, between assimilation and erasure. And so, as you close your eyes and drift into sleep, imagine the hilltop cities alive once more. Hear the murmurs of markets, the chants of sacred rites, the clinking of bronze artisans at work, and wonder, in a world that has swallowed empires and silenced kings, how does a culture achieve immortality, not through conquest, but through subtle, enduring influence? The Etruscans may be gone, but their mystery remains, inviting us to look closer, to question, and to imagine what life was like on those volcanic hills. Long ago, when a civilization danced between shadow and light, leaving behind a legacy that continues to whisper through the ages. Though the Etruscans vanished as a political entity over 2 millennia ago, their influence reverberates in ways that are subtle yet profound, like echoes trapped in the folds of history waiting to be heard. Sit back and imagine the streets of early Rome, where the layout of temples, the design of public squares, and the methods of governance were quietly shaped by techniques perfected on Etruscan hills. Some scholars suggest that even the ceremonies of Roman religious life, the auguries, the rituals, the very notion of divine sanction for rulers, were inherited from Etruscan spiritual frameworks, adapted and transformed, yet still retaining the faint imprint of their originators. Archaeological discoveries continue to surprise, revealing not just objects, but the fingerprints of thought, trade, and craft. Bronze statuettes, terracotta decorations, and painted tombs speak of aesthetic sensibilities that prized both realism and symbolism, blending the practical with the sacred. Each artifact, whether a finely wrought mirror or an engraved bronze warrior, offers a glimpse into a world that is half known, half imagined, a civilization that thrived in the spaces between mystery and memory. Modern techniques have begun to peel back layers of obscurity. Chemical analysis tells us what they ate. Isotopic studies hint at migration patterns. And DNA evidence suggests a complex mingling of peoples, reinforcing the idea that the Etruscans were neither isolated nor simple, but participants in a web of Mediterranean exchange. Yet even as science illuminates certain aspects, the culture resists complete understanding. Language remains an unsolved puzzle, leaving historians to interpret glimpses of thought and ritual from inscriptions whose meaning can only be guessed. Tombs reveal both the opulence and the everyday, but they do not speak of political debates, personal ambitions, or the sounds of laughter and argument that filled their homes. Their cities, once vibrant, now lie beneath layers of later development, or have been reduced to ruins that challenge reconstruction. Still, there is a haunting continuity. Roman law, urban planning, artistic techniques, and religious structures carry whispers of the Etruscan vision, as though the civilization persists not in its own right, but through the vessels it shaped and the hands it influenced. And so we are left with a paradox, a culture simultaneously vanished and immortal, known and unknowable, tangible and spectral. As you drift further into this story, consider the power of influence without visibility, the endurance of a people through the subtleties of design, ritual, and thought. The Etruscans teach us that survival is not always about the monuments that stand tall, but about the ideas, the systems, and the artistry that quietly guide the generations that follow. In the shadows of their legacy, one question remains: how much of our modern world, often taken for granted, is shaped by those who existed in the quiet hills long before history recorded their names? Picture the rolling hills of ancient Etruria at dawn, the mist curling over terraced fields, the faint echo of hammers in workshops, and the soft lapping of river waters against stone quays. It was here, in these seemingly ordinary landscapes, that a civilization quietly engineered techniques and traditions that would ripple through history, often unnoticed but profoundly felt. The Etruscans were master metalworkers, sculptors, and architects, and some researchers suggest their innovations in bronze casting, particularly the lost wax method, influenced generations of artisans far beyond their borders. Their urban planning, meticulous and intentional, organized settlements around sacred axes, public squares, and infrastructure that balanced both ceremonial function and practical necessity. Roads and drainage systems anticipated the efficiency that later Roman engineers would perfect, but their conceptual seeds lay in these Etruscan communities, from one mystery to the next. Consider their artistic legacy. Tomb paintings depicting banquets, athletic competitions, and sacred rituals reveal not only aesthetic sensibilities, but also a society that understood narrative and symbolism, capturing fleeting moments of life with a reverence for permanence. These visual stories are more than decoration. They are coded memories, lessons, and identity markers, transmitted silently across centuries. Linguistically, the Etruscans remain an enigma. Their inscriptions hint at complex social structures, legal codes, and spiritual practices, yet full comprehension eludes us. Some scholars argue that the inability to decipher their language in its entirety has preserved a form of cultural invisibility, forcing subsequent societies, including the Romans, to absorb and adapt their systems without ever fully translating them. This silent absorption is seen in religious rites, political structures, and ceremonial regalia: purple-striped togas, ivory scepters, triumphal rituals, echoing symbolic frameworks established long before the Republic rose to dominance. Economically, the Etruscans were both producers and facilitators of Mediterranean trade, connecting coastal cities, inland settlements, and distant partners in networks that prefigured Roman commercial expansion. Their metalwork, pottery, and luxury goods traveled far, carrying with them techniques, tastes, and ideas. Yet, despite these far-reaching impacts, the Etruscans never left behind an empire. Their power was measured in influence, in subtle currents, rather than visible conquest. This paradox, the disappearance of political control, alongside the persistence of cultural and technological innovation, invites reflection on what it truly means to endure. As we trace these threads into the Roman era, one question lingers, quiet yet insistent. Could a civilization vanish so completely in name, yet shape the very foundations of history in ways we still live with today? And so, as the sun sets over the hills once home to the Etruscans, we are left with a landscape that is both familiar and mysterious, where the remnants of walls, tombs, and temples whisper stories that refuse to be silenced. Their cities, long absorbed into the expanding Republic, may have vanished from maps, but the echoes of Etruscan life continue to resonate in the legal principles, architectural forms, artistic achievements, and religious rituals that shaped the Mediterranean world for centuries. Some researchers believe that every triumph, every Senate decree, every arch spanning a Roman aqueduct carries a hidden thread of Etruscan ingenuity. Others suggest that their greatest legacy is not tangible at all, but found in the very idea that culture can survive, adapt, and inspire long after political dominion has faded. As you close your eyes and drift toward sleep, imagine the bronze artisans at their forges, the priests interpreting the flight of birds, the families celebrating funerals with games and ceremonies all small, intimate moments that together formed a civilization both ordinary and extraordinary. The volcanic hills, once silent witnesses to their rise and transformation, now guard secrets that continue to challenge scholars, inspire artists, and captivate curious minds. The story of the Etruscans reminds us that history is rarely linear, that civilizations can vanish yet leave traces woven into the fabric of what comes after. Their life, their innovations, their ceremonies, and their art endure quietly beneath the surface of the world we know today. In the quiet of the night, as shadows lengthen and thoughts wander, one realizes that the Etruscans, though lost in name, are never truly gone. They live on in the structures we inhabit, the systems we govern by, and the beauty we still marvel at. And perhaps, in acknowledging their subtle yet profound influence, we understand that immortality is not measured by conquest or empire, but by the enduring imprint of culture on the human story. So, sit back, relax, and let the whispers of Etruria carry you into dreams where ancient hills breathe once more, and the silent architects of civilization continue to speak across the millennia, inviting us to listen, to wonder, and to remember.